For Marine Wildlife webinar. This webinar was organized by a number of different partners that are actually trying to salvage the scraps from a in-person Earth Day event that we were calling Ocean Day back at the beginning of coronavirus. So this is put on by the City of Hollandale Beach, the City of Hollywood, Broward County, FDEP, Friends of Our Florida Reefs, and Sierra Club of Broward. So just some quick meeting etiquette. This is GoToWebinar, so you will be muted. There's no way to unmute yourself, only we can share our screens, so don't get frustrated trying to do that. Please ask questions into the Q&A box, and we will work to answer them at the end of the presentation. We'll be doing answers and discussion at the end. And this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available soon after the presentation itself. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to our esteemed moderator today, Hollywood City Commissioner Carol Shuham.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Well, we have three wonderful guests with us today, and it is truly my honor to introduce Dr. Pat Quinn. Dr. Quinn is a senior natural resource specialist with the Beach and Marine section of Broward County's Environmental Protection and Growth Management Department in the Environmental Planning and Community Resilience Division. In his current position, Dr. Quinn oversees projects that include artificial reefs, coastal and marine debris removal, and manatee protection. Prior to joining the county, Pat spent 19 years in working airport ramp operations for FedEx, both in Memphis and Fort Lauderdale, then 6 years with Nova Southeastern as a marine science research assistant. He earned his BBA from Memphis State University and an MS from Nova, as well as a PhD from Nova's Oceanographic Center in 2010. His research focused on fish, assemblages, and coral recruitment on artificial reefs. And Pat, it is an honor to have you here today, and we're all really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you so much.
So thank you. Let's see if this works.
And I'm in charge of the clock, so you're in trouble.
All right. Can y'all see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, I manage the Manatee Protection Plan as part of Broward County. This is a shortened version of a talk that I usually give. It takes about an hour, so we'll see how fast I can get through this one without cutting too many corners. See how I can scroll this. All right, so manatees have been around for a long time. People think that they aren't indigenous to Florida, but they've been around for thousands of years. They were hunted back in the 1800s, and the population started to get pretty seriously low. So in 1893, they were protected, and they were one of the first species that were actually protected in the United States. Okay, so threats to manatees. FWC, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, has a number of categories that a manatee mortality are put into. I'm going to talk about the first four because those are the big ones. We have watercraft, floodgates, other human related mortality, cold stress. And the other four, the perinatal, if a manatee is below 150 centimeters, it just goes into that category. They don't specify why it died. Natural, sometimes things just die. That's just the way it is. Undetermined, if the animal can't be, if the cause of death can't be determined, it goes into that category. And sometimes I know manatee died, but they can't get to the carcass to try to determine what it was. So I'll talk about the first four for now. So watercraft, this watercraft mortality accounts for about 20 to 25% of the number of dead manatees in the state each year. And two different types. There's the prop when they get cut up, and there's blunt trauma from actually the hull of the vessel hitting the manatee. It's not always fatal. So it's kind of a, we talk about the number of manatees that are actually killed. That doesn't actually consider the number of manatees that were injured. The manatee at the top obviously was severely injured. His paddle was probably cut in half. And while the manatee didn't die, it seriously compromised its ability to move around, to go to food resources or try to find a hot water refuge. The manatee at the bottom was hit in a slow speed zone. The person driving the boat was obviously going a lot faster than that. The manatee had a calf with her. So we were really concerned about that manatee dying. We searched, never found her. 2 weeks later, I'm happy to report, we did see the manatee and she was healing up. So that's certainly good. But this is a pretty serious threat to the manatees, and there are reports that some manatees have been hit possibly 40 times in their lifetime. So imagine somebody coming into your house once a year and hitting you with a baseball bat or a machete. That's got to be, not something you want to look forward to. The floodgate and canal locks, this isn't as big an issue as it used to be, because most of the floodgates, these are water control structures that prevent the saltwater intrusion to the west and keeps the fresh water back in the Everglades. But most of these are outfitted with sensors, much like a garage door would have. If there's something in the way, the garage door won't come down or the doors won't close. It will open back up for a period of time, let the animal, whatever it is, move in and out. So this is actually a much less of a threat to manatees anymore. Human related, this was a biggie also. Humans seem to think that the environment is their trash can. So they just dump everything into it. There are 2 manatees in the upper right where those 2 orange circles are. You can barely see them in the nasty water. So people just, it's easier just to walk by it than it is to pick it up, I guess, but I don't understand that mentality. Fishing line, you see from the bottom picture that the manatees and just about anything can get tangled up in the fishing line and cause serious issues. Cold stress, manatees can't handle the cold very well. They're not like whales or dolphins. They don't have a thick layer of blubber that protects them from that. So anything below about 68 degrees, a manatee will start getting stressed out. If it gets into the low 60s, the manatee could die in about 24 hours. It's pretty rapid at that point. So mortality in Broward can happen just about anywhere. These dots on the right represent the different types. I've cut this down. There was another slide that shows the mortality categories for these, but the red ones are the watercraft mortality. You see a lot down here in Port Everglades. My cursor won't work on this. So it's about 2/3 of the way down on the right, number of red dots right there. And so there was a lot of mortality being attributed to Port Everglades, but a lot of the canals drain into Port Everglades. So a dead manatee could actually be killed somewhere else, and over a period of time, the tide could sweep it into that area. But as you see from the numbers on the left, Broward doesn't have a lot of watercraft mortality. We don't have a whole lot of mortality in general. Some counties are running well over 100 dead manatees a year. But then if you look at the bottom, watercraft mortalities is still a major issue. 2009 was a record year, and we've had 4 record years since then, and the numbers keep going up. So that is something that we still need to be very concerned about, even though the population does appear to be increasing. So since we do have a large number of manatees, the state and cabinet back in the 90s decided to have all these counties create a manatee protection plan. So they gave us attachment K, which is a laundry list of things that must be included in the manatee protection plan. And you could have everything else too. On the bottom, it says other relevant data. So we were actually the last county to have ours approved in 2008. Yay, we came in last, but we came in. So we've got our plan. Other counties are kind of are creating their own plans, even though they're not required. They're seeing the benefits of the manatee protection. So a manatee protection plan has 3 basic elements: boating safety, education awareness, and the boat facility siting plan. Boating safety was done back in the 90s, so it wasn't much of an issue. Now we're used to being heavily regulated in the county, but that's all the manatee protection zones, all the speed zones that you see on the waterway. Education and awareness, this kind of blurs into the next one, but it's teaching people about the manatees, about the issues that they have in the environment, and what they can do to help protect the manatees. And then the boat facility siting plan, that was the one that slowed us down so much. It's regulating the amount of marina development that we have in the county based on where the manatees are. It took about 6 or 7 years at the table for everybody to come together, and nobody went away happy. So that was actually a pretty good compromise. Again, the boating safety component is all the signs that you see out there, and as part of that component, we have brochures. The picture on the left is the inside of the brochure, so people can look at that and determine where they are in the county and what the general speed zones are. It's like going down the road and, gosh, when was the last time I saw a speed zone? I don't know if I should be doing 35 or 45 until the blue lights behind you tell you what you should be doing. Education and awareness, we give number of different manatee talks each year. We have social media outreach. We have radio ads that are going in the mornings and the evenings and on the weekends, urging people to slow down and be aware that the manatees are out there. We have giveaways that we give out to the marinas. We're encouraging people to go plastic free for our friends of the sea. Here's one. And avoid using single-use plastics. And then the brochures that we have at the bottom, and we give that to marine law enforcement so they can give out to the boaters on the waterway too. We developed an app, so I Spy a Manatee, so people can report manatee sightings that they see. They can take a picture of it. Their location is turned on, and the middle one there, it will pinpoint their location. They can enter some information, and then that's the only manatee in the world that has a thumb when it gives you the thumbs up. It also has a map location in there that if you don't know where you are, there we go, she's showing it. If you don't know where you are, you could find your location on the map, and it will tell you the speed zone that you're in, similar to that brochure I showed you before. The boat facility sighting plan component, that was the big one. We didn't know really how to divide the county up, so we broke it up into 3 different major areas and assigned a certain number of slips per area in the county. I could talk for an hour on this part, but I won't get into it too much. But to do all this, to allow marina development, we have to have some conservation measures. So we implemented a monitoring program. We're putting signage up at marinas. We have law enforcement that's out there, an observation deck, which I'm excited about, a county website, and then some construction conditions. That's, if you're going to build a marina, you'll find out about that. Weekly during the season, mid-November to the end of March, we do aerial survey flights around the county. About 300 feet up, we fly 100 and something miles, and that takes about 2.5 hours. And so we're looking where the manatees are and the numbers that we have in the county. It's about 168 manatees in that picture right there. I won't get into this too much, but basically we fly from one county line to the other and a number of the different side canals, everywhere within east of a water control structure for the major canals. Manatee distribution, well, we find them all over the place. What's interesting here, though, is on the left side, you see from the Palm Beach County line south to basically Port Everglades, we see a lot of manatees. On the other slide, the PE is Port Everglades. From Port Everglades south to the Miami-Dade line, we don't see near as many manatees. We see 10 times as many more north of Port Everglades than we do see south. And we're totally weather dependent. These are peaks of manatees that we've seen, and they correlate to the cold temperatures that we have. See, the red one was 2010, 2011. We had a cold December. The rest of the year warmed up. The purple was 2011, 2012. That was in January. We had the peak, and then it dropped off. And we could have hundreds of manatees coming into the county and out of the county in 1 week's time. It's absolutely amazing. It's a conga line of manatees up and down the intracoastal. We put signs up at all the boat ramps. We're putting them up at marinas, and anybody that has water access wants a sign, we'd be happy to give you one. We have a deputy that patrols the New River, South Fork of the New River, and through Port Everglades. We call it the Manatee Loop. He's a dedicated officer. He doesn't patrol anywhere else, but he does help FWC out when they have a manatee issue somewhere else. And breaking ground next week, breaking water, is an observation tower that's going up at Secret Woods Nature Center. And this is Manatee Central along the South Fork of the New River there. So if people want to see manatees, those are actually manatees in the picture. Those aren't canoes that are overturned. And hopefully by manatee season next year, there will be an observation tower there so people can go get up high and look down in the water and see the manatees. We have a website. I don't know if anybody does websites anymore, but we put various information up there. And if you want the Manatee Protection Plan, I can send it to you, and it's guaranteed to put you to sleep. And that's all, folks. And I think I've got 6 seconds left.
You got a little bit more because we started early.
Okay.
Hope
that wasn't too fast.
That's okay. No, we got a few extra minutes, so I'm going to take advantage of my monitor role here. Right. You kind of, I know you have a much longer presentation, but just talking about slips and how when you put together the Manatee Protection Plan, you had to limit the number of additional slips in municipalities. I just wanted to get your understanding on how the definition of a slip really doesn't make sense in light of the state law that prohibits boats from being told they can't anchor anywhere. So, you know, we have a situation in Hollywood and North and South Lake where we have tons of boats anchoring, not in slips, and that's not counting towards the Manatee Protection Plan. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is a tricky one, and other counties running into that. If I'm looking over here, my screens are over here, my camera's over here. So it's kind of a case of regulate what you can. We also have conditions about turbidity in the water from construction. So some place will have to have a turbidity curtain around, and they can't let any of that turbidity outside of that curtain when they're doing construction. But if you watch a big yacht go by in the same area, they're so big and they're so deep, they're stirring up a lot of turbidity. So we can't necessarily regulate for how many boats anchor in any specific spot, or even if we have the authority to regulate for that. But what we can regulate for is the total number of slips in the county. If you're looking for, say we have 20 boats that are anchored out there, and it does seem like a lot of boats. When we have 45,000 boats in the county that we're actually regulating those, then it becomes a much smaller percentage of everything that we can control. So, you know, again, another analogy is like speeding on the road. A cop's not going to pull you over for going 7 miles an hour over the speed limit, but if you're doing 27 miles an hour over the speed limit, he's going to get you for that. So it's not a perfect system, and we fully admit that and acknowledge that. But it's just really to the point of regulating as much as you possibly can, and then you know, hope the rest of it is kind of, you know, takes care of itself. Thanks for putting me on the spot there.
No, and real quick, because I have one more minute. Why do you think there's so many fewer manatees south of Port Everglades than north of Port Everglades?
I think that Miami-Dade County has the things that manatees need to survive. They've got the food down there. They've got the water, the refuges that they can go and give birth or whatnot. And then they have the warm water refuges. So when it gets cold, Broward has warm water refuges. Granted, we have some seagrass and some foliage for the manatees to eat, but not a lot. We don't have them like they do further north in the Indian River Lagoon system. So I think basically when it gets cold, manatees come down here for the warm water refuges and the power plants. And when it warms back up, they go back out. So it's just a hot tub for them. You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much. And we love the I Spy a Manatee program so much. Thank you, Dr. Quinn. And next, I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Derek Burkholder. Dr. Burkholder, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. He's received his bachelor's degree from Albion College and a PhD from FIU. He's focused on the top-down control of seagrass communities. So we have a lot of questions for you today about that. And currently, he's the director of Nova University's Marine Environmental Education Center, the MEEC Center, which is right behind where I live. And he's the principal investigator for Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program and a research assistant with the Guy Harvey Research Institute and Save Our Seas Shark Center. Thank you so much, Dr. Burkholder, Derek, for being with us today. We're really excited to see your presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me today. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation at this point?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So, yeah, again, thank you for having me today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the research that we have going on at NSU, both with sharks and sea turtles. So I'm very, very fortunate to be part of the NSU Helmholtz College of Arts and Sciences, and very fortunate to work with a number of different research groups within the college as well. So as you said, I work with the Guy Harvey Research Institute and the Save Our Seas Shark Center as a research scientist at NSU. And there, we're doing a lot of work trying to understand a little bit more about our sharks, not only in South Florida, but also globally. You know, one of the things that we found with sharks around the world is that, you know, we've got over 500 different species of sharks worldwide, and many of these populations are in pretty drastic decline. As humans, we, you know, use sharks for a lot of different things. You know, we eat the meat of sharks, we take their fins for things like shark fin soup. We use their cartilage for medicines, even oil out of their livers gets put into makeups and lotions. And all of that really takes a pretty massive toll on these animals. It's estimated over 100 million sharks. I'll say that again, over 100 million sharks are being killed every single year around the world to make all that stuff happen. Many of these shark species are very slow growing, long-lived animals that don't have very many babies at a time. So when we're taking that many of them out of the water, it's having a huge impact on these populations. And many of them are in pretty major decline, some as much as 98% gone from their historic values. About 25% of all elasmobranchs, which are the sharks, skates, and stingrays, are endangered or critically endangered around the world right now because of that. And so a lot of the work we're doing at NSU is really trying to understand a little bit more about conserving these animals and looking at things like movements, habitat use. And one of the ways we do that is using something called a satellite tag. So a satellite tag is a pretty fantastic tool that allows us to follow these animals along as they're cruising around the oceans. Working in the marine environment is a very difficult thing. We might only see these sharks for a couple of minutes next to the boat, or if we're lucky enough to observe them in the water diving for a few minutes here and there. But as soon as they swim away, it's much harder to know kind of what's going on. And so tagging studies have provided a lot of new opportunities to learn more about these animals. And that started off with something called a conventional tag, which is just a number tag or a mark on their fin or something like that. And if that animal is ever caught again, you can learn more about it. But with the invention of satellite tags, what this does, this allows us to put the tag on the fin, and it'll actually report back to us as this animal is moving around. So you can see on this animal here, the tag it's hard to see, I know, but up at the top of the fin, that's a satellite tag. And then on this fish here, this one on the side, this is called a pop-off satellite tag. But both of these work in a way that when sort of the fin of that shark breaks the surface, that tag is going to send us pretty much an email from anywhere in the world telling us where that shark is. And what we've done is we've actually put together a website, the Guy Harvey Research Institute, so the GHRItracking.org, where you can actually follow these animals around and see what they're doing. So again, this is just a screenshot from one of these animals, but what you're seeing, this is the track of a mako shark. So each one of these dots represents a place where that fin broke the surface and the animal reported back telling us where it was. The different colors on the map here just represent different years. So this one was out there for a little over a year, it seems, between the white and the yellow. This was on a mako shark that was tagged at the star here off of Ocean City, Maryland. And then the last place we heard from it was this little green dot right here. So on our website, if you take a look, anyone that has a little fin shape, that was the last place we've heard from that shark. And you can actually click on that, and it'll tell you anytime this breaks the surface, again, it's going to report. So if we're still hearing from it, you might see where that shark was yesterday. So it's kind of a cool tool to be able to follow these sharks around, and for us, provides an amazing opportunity to look at where these guys are going. Here you can see this particular shark traveled through the exclusive economic zone, or the EEZ, of multiple countries, the US, Canada, Bermuda, and even down into the Bahamas. And what happens there is it really sort of highlights the struggle we have with conservation and management of something like a shark or billfish that moves, or a tuna that moves long distances through many, many countries' waters. One of these studies also found that, we might be seeing a much higher rate of loss in especially the short fin mako shark than previously thought. Of our animals, about 30% of our sharks are being killed by fishermen, usually within about a year of being tagged with a satellite tag. All estimates that were being used for monitoring and managing that fishery was looking at a 0.3% of the population being killed by humans. So we're looking at orders of magnitude different being shown from these tags than what was previously thought. So it's really opened up a lot of doors, and a lot more management and conservation is going in based on this particular study. Locally, I'm very excited about some of our research where we actually are getting people out with us to tag some of these sharks. We want to know what our sharks are doing here in South Florida. So our shark tagging awareness and research program is designed to take out largely school groups, but anybody from the general public can come out as well. And what we do is we take up to 30 people on the boat with us. We're able to get them out, get hands-on with these sharks, catching, tagging, taking the measurements, taking the tissue samples. So we're doing the active research and they're learning about these animals as we go. It's a lot of fun and we've had a fantastic time with students here in South Florida getting out on the water. I'd also like to tell you a little bit about some of our sea turtle work as well. So again, I'm fortunate to work with the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program as the director there, and we do the monitoring here in Broward County. So there are 7 species of sea turtles worldwide, 5 of which we have here in South Florida. The loggerhead, green turtle, and leatherbacks actually will nest on our beaches as well. So it's a very important nesting habitat for, we got about 24 miles of beach that we monitor each day. And it's important nesting habitat for these animals, especially for the loggerhead sea turtles. The Northwest Atlantic population is the largest loggerhead population in the world, and 90% of loggerhead of that nesting population nests here in Florida. So it's, Florida beaches are incredibly, incredibly important for these animals. So with our program, we start out about half an hour before sunrise every day, and we're driving up and down those 24 miles of beach, and we're going to be looking for crawls from the moms that come up overnight. So you can see here the flipper prints in the sand. This particular nest was a leatherback turtle where they crawled up, made a great big mound there where she dug her nest. We're going to flag those nests off, mark them off so they're protected through the time that the nests are incubating. Then we're going to monitor those throughout the season. We do see things like this. It's called a false crawl, where the mom crawled up. Something wasn't quite right. Maybe the sand wasn't right. Maybe there was a tourist running down trying to take its picture. But for whatever reason, she turned around and went back to the water without digging a nest or laying any eggs. We also respond to sick, dead, injured sea turtles in the area. And we do have a 24-hour hotline for that as well. We also may move imperiled nests. This is one that was sort of inside Port Everglades and would have been washed out. You can see how close it is to the water. It would have been washed out on the next high tide. So this nest will be picked up very, very carefully by trained professionals and moved to a new location to be reburied in a safer place. In some areas, we're also trying to deal with maybe some not so sea turtle friendly lighting on the beach, and we are caging nests in certain areas. So when the babies come up, they're not drawn to the street light or drawn to a home or a restaurant on the beach or something like that, and they're instead making their way to the water where they need to be. 3 days after a nest hatches, we will dig that nest up to look at how successful the nest was to get that hatching success data. But we also, a lot of times, will find some stragglers like these hatchlings here that will hold for the day and then release that evening to give them another shot at life. These are the ones that just didn't happen to make it out with all their brothers and sisters when the nest actually hatched on its own. So in 2019, I'm happy to say we had the highest number of nests that we've ever seen in Broward County since the program has started in the last over 30 years of monitoring. The 2020 season was down just a little bit from that. We had about a little over 3,100 nests, which is to be expected. We do see, kind of up and down year to year as the females don't come back every single year to nest. But we are seeing that these conservation measurements are working, and we are seeing that these nesting numbers are increasing over the years, which is very, very exciting. And lastly, I just want to say we have started, like I said, for 30 years, we've been monitoring the nesting in Broward County and looking at the hatchlings, but we've never really done much with the moms. And so a couple of years ago, some of my students and myself have started studying the females that come up on the beach. And we're using, again, the same satellite tracking. Here, you can go to turtletracking.org and you can follow some of our local sea turtles as well. We're tagging loggerhead and green sea turtles with satellite tags as well as flipper tags. This is Glenn Goodwin down here. This is his PhD project. He's doing some amazing work learning about where these guys are going once they leave the beach. Most of this work we're doing on the beach at night. We go out, wait for them to finish nesting, and then we put a little box around them to be able to work them up on the sand before releasing them quickly back into the ocean. We are doing some work in Biscayne Bay as well, which is allowing us to look at the animals in water. You may wonder how we catch them, and if hopefully this video works, what you'll see is we chase them around, again, trained and in very specific ways. We're going to follow these guys around, get close enough to hopefully jump off and grab the animal and hopefully get it up to the surface. Now, he made that look very easy. It doesn't always go that way, but is definitely the fastest and safest way to capture a turtle in the water without stressing them out very much at all. So
We're going to give you a 2-minute warning here.
Okay. So with turtletracking.org, you can follow these animals around. You can see where they're going. Each one of these is a different turtle. We can see a lot of our green turtles are spending time right down here in the in sort of the Marquesas and the lower Keys up in Biscayne Bay. In Florida Bay. We've had some of our loggerheads travel quite a bit further, all the way over to Mexico here. We've had some go to North Carolina, others in the Bahamas, around the Caribbean. So it's really incredible to see where these animals are moving from sort of this peninsula area here at the tip of South Florida. And then the last part, again, unfortunately, this is a place where we're still closed due to COVID, but the Marine Environmental Education Center is a partnership between Broward County Parks and Nova Southeastern University. And we opened our doors as a Marine Environmental Education Center here in South Florida in a historic home called the Carpenter House on Hollywood Beach. We have a exhibit hall. We've got Captain, our green sea turtle, living in the family's old swimming pool, and we host a number of different education programs for school groups as well as the public. Currently, a lot of those we've taken to virtual presentations, and each Saturday right now we're hosting a seminar series. But again, we do offer school programs if anybody is interested in virtual programs at the moment. So this is the conversion of the old swimming pool with much more filtration in place to be able to house Captain, our lovely green sea turtle, in our swimming pool. So with that, I would love to take any questions you guys might have.
Well, I know we're going to have more questions at the end, but real quick, I just wanted to ask you about sargassum and turtles. There's a bit of a debate on if it should be removed from the beach when it builds up. It's my understanding that if there's too much, it impedes the turtle nesting process. But if there's none, it's also detrimental. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's going to be the sargassum, I think, that you're talking about, which is the floating seaweed. The sea grasses are generally rooted on the ground and are something that the sea turtles eat, but the sargassum is the floating seaweed that has been building up in some years far more than it has in the past. And yeah, it depends on sort of the density and where it falls and things like that. But there have been areas that have shown where it can impede even getting to the beach. In some areas in the Caribbean, the sargassum is so thick that it completely fills a bay to the point where the turtles aren't even able to swim through it to get to the beach. And so there are some impacts there. There hasn't been any definitive work done on the beaches of South Florida or anything like that to say, does that extra mass shade it? Maybe it cools the nest down. Maybe it lengthens the incubation. That's stuff that we still kind of need to figure out a lot of that at the moment. Hindsight, you do expect that really dense amounts may impact the moms crawling up the beach. It will definitely have an impact largely, likely on the hatchlings that are trying to get back to the water. If there's mountains and mountains of sargassum for them to get over, that might slow a few of them down or they might get tangled up in it. So the direct impacts, we're still trying to figure that out. But yeah, it is something that we do need to learn more about. Some of those nutrients may be important for the turtles, but also if there's too much of a good thing, it can also, sort of swamp them out as well. Great question.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that terrific presentation. And thank you for everything that you're doing to save our turtles and sharks. I'm next thrilled to introduce Laura Eldridge. Laura has been working in South Florida over the past 13 years and has completed 2 master's degrees in marine biology and marine environmental sciences at NOVA. And she specializes in marine mammal behavior ecology and management, sea turtle nesting ecology as well. She's immersed herself in the marine mammal world and has worked with whales, dolphins, otters, manatees, you name it, as well as coral. And her note here says the occasional mermaid also. Her background continues to support her volunteer efforts in marine mammal stranding coordination and rescue that has led as the lead federal designee for the Marine Animal Rescue Society, which is the organization which she's representing today. She's recognized for her significant contributions to marine conservation by a former governor and she's earned numerous accolades for her work in South Florida, including the Loggerhead Marine Life Center's Award for Blue Ambassador of the Year. It's fantastic. Normally during her work week, she's the manager of the Biscayne Bay Aquatic Preserve for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and manages almost 70,000 acres of submerged lands and islands encompassing 2 state aquatic preserves throughout Biscayne Bay. And I'm very thankful that you're here, Laura, and really excited to see your presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you to our sponsors today. So let's get this up. Can y'all see my presentation?
Yep.
All right, is it still working for you? Blank on me.
We see it.
We see it. It's not in presentation mode, but we can see the slides.
Okay, try. Well, I know this worked a second ago, guys. Let me try switching.
Remember, technology is making our life easier.
That's what they tell us, right? Okay,
It would
now
be a webinar if we had some hiccup. It's still the same. Basically, we can see it as if you were working on it. Oh, cute manatee.
Hey, wait a minute, I'm working that street corner, come on.
You know, I get to be in the manatee world too there, Pat.
I do know that.
That's an amazing picture.
Indeed.
What was the process again for the double screens?
So swap presenter, it's the top left second button if you're looking in the presenter screen view. It's just swap, this little drop down.
Okay, that's the problem. I'm not in presenter view. Okay,
Okay.
can you see presenter view?
We see presenter view, so display settings.
Thank you. All right,
Swap, and you got it.
now we're done. All right, woo. Well, we had to get one of those out of the way, right?
That's right.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I did want to start off today just saying, yeah, again, my name is Laura Eldridge, so I'm really going to be talking a little bit about what's going on in the world of cetaceans here in South Florida, and then also kind of turning the key a little bit, and you know, we're talking a lot about what we're doing for them, but also what are they doing for us. So what is a cetacean? You may have never heard of that word before in your life. So it's really a taxonomic classification, meaning all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. We don't talk a lot about porpoises here in this area because we don't actually have species that are classified as porpoises within the South Florida region. And here at Mars, we spend a lot of time working with cetaceans, specifically rescue, rehabilitation, research, and education around them. Also work a little bit with manatees, but I'll get to that later. So the name cetacean is actually one that even some people can't really wrap their heads around. So just like this poster here, Whales of the World, it's actually incorrect. This is a poster of all the cetaceans of the world. So you'll see on the left side are very large baleen whales. So they feed and forage via the use of plates within their mouth that filter out very small planktonic organisms. And then on the right are toothed or Odontocetes. And so these are all of our whales and dolphins that have teeth, and our porpoises as well. So, you know, typically within our area, the sperm whale we see a lot of, but we also have a lot of beaked whales, which are a lot of these whales in the bottom right corner. And so these are kind of loner individual species, but we do get them. They're typically our third number strander within the South Florida region. So who is Mars? Well, we're the Marine Animal Rescue Society. I've been working with them for about 13 years now. So we're a federally recognized nonprofit. And so we have the permits via NOAA, so the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and then also with the Florida Fish and Wildlife to work with cetaceans, but also manatees within the South Florida region, specifically in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties. We are 100% volunteer run. Anytime, if you've ever been on the beach and you've seen, during a stranding, or you've been out on a vessel and you've seen assistance with FWC with a manatee rescue, you might notice us by what we call obnoxious yellow t-shirts that have our rescue team and our Mars logo on the back. So we wear these specifically for these types of events just to help promote awareness, but also during these events, they can be very hectic. We want to make sure that we're very easy to spot. So also to go through what is a stranding. We may not have had the time to familiarize yourself with that type of word. So there's a couple different very specific descriptions of a stranding that NOAA has created. So you can either have an animal that has already passed away, that is deceased, that is floating with the currents out in the middle of United States waters, or they may have actually been pushed on shore. Or we can have an animal that's actually still alive. And so they can be floating at the surface as well out in the open ocean, or they may have run aground. They may have actually swam onto the shoreline. And that means that they can actually potentially go back out into the water of their own volition, or maybe they cannot. But the main consideration here is that they came to the shoreline for a reason, and that's because they need medical condition. And this is the main reason why we never want to push these animals back out into the water. So why do strandings occur? This comic really summarizes it. No, just kidding. Not really, but for us, it's really just this giant open question mark, unfortunately. There's no one size fits all for why strandings occur throughout the entirety of the world. There has been research in certain localized areas where one species within a small region has been shown to, increase its probability of stranding due to a specific factor. Like the change in wind patterns, or the change in wind and air pressure has actually been noted before. But that same species in another region may not strand with the same probability or the same frequency due to that same factor. So there's a lot of, it's really kind of this open area of research. If anyone's really interested in this, this is something that's really great to dive into, and there's a lot of research going on throughout the world. But primarily, when we think about strandings, we think about weather considerations. So anytime that we have a hurricane coming through, we have to make sure that our Mars staff is, ready and aware and ready for the potential for an animal to literally be pushed in due to the winds and the wave action. Disease, of course. So an immune response, the animal is sick and they actually come in. Social cohesion. So if you haven't heard this before, several of our cetacean species like to live in very large groups, or pods as we call them. And so they typically have a matriarchal society. So there's one leader, and in a lot of species, in a lot of pods, it's the oldest female. And so if you've got, the oldest of the group is potentially, a higher probability of a depreciated immune system or becoming sick. Geriatric, and so they'll actually come into shore for their own personal reasons, and the group follows them due to that social cohesion. Following prey in shore, we see that a lot with our toothed whales, of course. So we see this a lot like in South Carolina, where they're driving in fish to shore as a way to catch them, and then they accidentally get stuck. Out of habitat, so they're moving out of their normal range. And then human related. So human related can be sonar trauma, like barotrauma, which hurts their ears, their ear bones, oil spills, caught in fishing lines or pots. And so this is something that's related to humans specifically, and they do cause strandings. So you might be asking yourself, I heard this is an all volunteer run organization, in this like selfie world, wanting to get involved kind of a world that we live in. That sounds awesome. And, how do you want to get involved? And you can, of course, we hold trainings, normally several times throughout the year. 2020 has been a little bit of a, a difference for us, of course, as everyone understands. So we like to do a lot of hands-on training and working with literal blow-up dolphins. So you learn how to put an animal in a stretcher and to assist with holding them. But I do want to make sure that people understand, working with these types of animals, they're very strong animals. They're animals that are not typically with, they're not coming onto shore It's a stressful environment for them, and it's not actually glamorous for humans. So we have instances where we spend a lot of time working with law enforcement and transporting dead and deceased animals or carcasses. Sometimes we have to do necropsies or animal autopsies. So this is a beach necropsy that's going on right now and collecting samples for a law enforcement case. So you see our FWC officer assisting our Mars volunteer there. But typically this occurs in a lab. We take the animal back to a lab and we literally have to take samples from all of the organs, the blubber, the teeth. We're trying to age the animal. This is really critically important to a lot of our species that I said. They may be individuals, they may be rare species, and we don't have a lot of data on their life histories. And so that goes, all of that data then gets put into the National Stranding Database. This is an open access database. Anyone can publicly go and request data from it. And so we want to make sure that the life histories and the information from these strandings is utilized in a manner that not only helps protect and conserve those species, but also helps us make management decisions of those species. We do a lot with press, of course. The stranding events can be very large. We can have, hundreds or thousands of people on the beach at a time. It's a lot of coordination. And the animals, unfortunately, if they strand alive, but they're about to pass away of their own volition, it's not a pretty scene. And unfortunately, these are animals that typically make a lot of movement as they're passing. And so you can see that in a picture here from a beach whale stranding that was in Hollywood several years ago. So the important thing to remember is that beachgoers will always be first. And this is key because say maybe you don't want to become a trained Mars volunteer, but you still want to help. You still want to know what you're supposed to be doing. And you're a beachgoer yourself. And so the main critical thing here is to know what not to do. So this is a case in point from a sperm whale stranding that we had here in Broward County several years ago. And the sperm whale was in distress and at the surface of the water, a couple hundred feet offshore, and beachgoers saw the animal and decided that they were just going to swim to it and start riding the animal. Now, unfortunately, this animal was only minutes away from passing at this time. A vessel with one of our Mars veterinarians was able to boat up to this animal and actually in water watch its last breath taken. So we know that it had not yet deceased at the time of this interaction. So this is obviously a very harmful interaction. And like I said, we're in a selfie world. People want pictures, want selfies with these animals. And we want to make sure that we're respecting them because they're already in a medical a medical situation. They're already completely stressed out, especially if they're already on shore. They live their whole lives in a water environment, not being on the shore. So we want to make sure that we're definitely being respectful for them. So what can you do? So we actually utilize FWC's hotline for all cetacean and manatee issues. And so that's really great for us because it just makes this like one central, phone number for everyone to remember. We also want to make sure that we don't push the animal back out. And you can actually have the power to demand this of others. Like I said before, they're already stressed out. There's something medically wrong with them. There's always a reason for the stranding. We want to make sure that they get the proper medical, proper medical triage coming from a veterinarian. You don't have to touch the animal, but also if there's an entanglement, we typically don't want to just cut it off. So there's some instances, of course, online where we see people rescuing animals out in the open ocean. That's a little bit of a different situation. But if we're concerned about the entanglement, it's best to note and take pictures of it if you have to just cut it off. But in 99% of cases, we're gonna wanna make sure that animal's getting care from a veterinarian, like I said. Of course, the cetaceans, they breathe out of a blowhole at the top of their head. So if we're helping an animal in a water environment, we want to make sure that they can breathe. We want to make sure the blowhole is elevated, it's above the surface of the water. If the animal is on the sand, we want to make sure that we're putting water on the body, but not putting water into the blowhole. So always protecting the blowhole. And then the other thing, staying quiet. Like I said, they're stressed out. Making sure that we're not yelling just kind of helps them in that moment, in that time too. So these are typically what we ask beachgoers to do, while Mars staff has been called in, while law enforcement has been called in, and they're on the way to the scene of a strand.
I'll give you 2 minutes there, Laura.
So like I said, turning gears a little bit. So how do cetaceans help us? So what are their ecosystem services? And what I mean when I say ecosystem services is the services that the environment or non-human species are then providing to humans. And the very simple answer is their poop. So more realistically, showing a picture here of a couple of sperm whales defecating at the surface. And so this is actually what whale poop looks like. So the important thing to mention here, so kind of key in on this like scavenging section that's here. So a lot of whales and cetaceans, whales, dolphins, porpoises, they're defecating at surface, but a lot of them are very deep divers. So they're swimming down to the bottom of the ocean where they're scavenging. So we've got our picture here of our sperm whale scavenging on a squid, but then they're coming back up to the surface to defecate. So they're bringing that nutrient, that vital resource within the ocean up to the surface, and they're bringing it up to the photosynthetic layer, meaning where our primary production, where our algae, where our phytoplankton thrive and survive. And then that then starts off the food web of the ocean. So that's feeding our krill, which you can see over in the far right. So we've got a picture of a gray whale eating some krill in the water. So it's very critical to the process of the ocean. And one of the things is that this is the reason why whales are called the ocean's fertilizer. They're conducting this type of mixing just by their normal foraging strategy. And so another way to look at it is another graph here. So naturally, of course, any organism, any feces that's within the water, because it's typically going to be of a higher density than the water itself, it's going to actually sink. And so this is a normal process where we're bringing nutrients from the surface of the water down to the base of the ocean. And this is what we call our biological pump. It's just a natural, ongoing, continual process. But whales actually engineer their own, and that's called a whale pump. So it actually has a scientifically valid and well-studied process where they're engineering their own type of pump of nutrients across the oceans through a vertical area. So that's pretty much it. I wanted to touch on those couple of things. I did want to kind of reiterate again what to do, so you guys can kind of recheck that, take a screenshot if that makes it easier for yourselves. And then a couple of our contacts. So of course, contacting me personally, but also Mars. And we do have a Facebook page where we put a little bit of information up there. And that's about all I've got. So I'm gonna take some time for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura. I had a quick question from a recent experience in Hollywood, which was a very small, I think it was a nurse shark, washed up to shore. And in that situation, should we call FWC, or because it's so small, don't worry about it, nature will take its course? What do you recommend when we find a deceased shark or other mammal on shore?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We frequently get those questions because, like I said, we're the Marine Animal Rescue Society. So in that case, I would probably honestly defer to either Dr. Burkholder at NOVA or Dr. Shivji at So I would call the academia institutions that I know would be interested in that species specifically, and if that would be important for them in their data and their research, to then, like I said, do a necropsy or an animal autopsy, and then be able to have that data within their research project for whatever region. So we get calls about, we've had crocs within Broward that we've had calls about, and so then I'm calling UF. So it's just kind of knowing exactly which entity would be most interested in that data and which can really monopolize and utilize that data to the best available science.
Thanks, and this is either for you or Derek, and that is baby turtles. I see it on Facebook all the time where people are out at night and or pre-dawn, and they think that they're doing something very heroic by helping these baby turtles get to the ocean. And I'm curious, what is the proper thing to do if they see a baby turtle going off track or heading in the wrong direction? I don't know if Derek wants to take that.
I'm happy to, that's fine. Yeah, so, I mean, the hatchling is going the wrong way. that one's a little harder. If it is, you know, an adult that's stranded, sick, dead, injured, anything like that, it would certainly be to call, if it's in Broward, our emergency line. There are stranding response groups pretty much in most of Florida at this point. So it would be calling ideally the one that's in that area, so that's easiest for them to respond. But you can also call FWC directly, and they will get that information to the proper entity if you don't know who it is in your area. For the hatchlings, they are protected species, so you don't really want to be picking them up or moving them around. So if they are definitely, you know, in a storm drain or something like that, that would be, again, when you would call one of our the stranding response teams to be able to come out and handle that.
Thank you. And this one's for Pat. This is from Kirk Dotson, who's watching with us right now. He's curious, what is the manatee breeding season and how many calves can a single manatee have?
The breeding season is year round. They don't seem to have any constraints about that. They don't have to find specific spots where they have to go. And most females have one calf, but occasionally they will have two calves, and the calf will stay with them for anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they have another one.
So it's like people, it depends. So we'll have to see if the manatee birth rate goes up after being stuck inside for COVID and things like that.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, in the warm water refuges during our surveys, they've got nothing to do but sit in a hot tub. So we do see a lot of mating activity in there.
And Faith Fair, I believe that's how you say or pronounce her last name. She'd like to know if you could explain some more about the manatee buffer zones not being monitored by boaters and who is responsible to help in those areas.
The buffer zones along the sides of the canal are, okay. Well, any boater that's out there is responsible for knowing what speed zone that they're actually in, and any marine law enforcement has the authority to enforce that in those jurisdictions. FWC can enforce it throughout the state, BSO can enforce it anywhere in the county, and then each individual municipal law enforcement agency has a jurisdiction in their own canals.
Okay, thank you. And I guess jump in on this one, and anyone who would like, but there's a question about how many stranded dolphins and whale stomachs that you're finding contain plastics and trash. I guess this would be for you, Laura. We're really proud in the city of Hollywood that we now just instituted a ban of single-use plastics on city property, which includes our beach. So we're hoping to do our part here, but are you, who's doing those autopsies and looking for that? And is it 100% right now? What are you seeing?
So yeah, great question, and really great work from the city on that effort. So for us, for the many necropsies that I've actually been to, I have not seen an ingestion of marine debris within the stomach. We typically see other diseases or other immune issues going on with the animals themselves. So it's been rather low. I know that there's a prevalence for that around the world, especially certain animals seem to be repeat eaters. And so for whatever reason, they're ingesting that, so maybe it's a behavioral issue where they're, they're not foraging properly for the proper species. And then they're just relying on what's available. There's been some studies that have shown that there's a potential, as the plastic itself is within a marine environment, there's kind of this chemosensory kind of smell of a sense of the plastics themselves, and it may smell kind of like food. And so they're just responding to that key indicator. But within these 3 counties that I've worked in, and even in some working in the Keys in Southwest Florida, I have not yet seen that.
I want to mention, and I failed to, that Hallandale Beach also has a plastic bag ban on the beach and a styrofoam ban. That's so we're all trying to do our part here as municipal officials. And that question about plastics was from Marcos Pena, so I want to thank him for that. I wanted to mention just a horrifying article I read last night about a manatee found with the word Trump etched into its skin. And it's just the most horrific thing. I can't imagine, Pat, when you read that story, but what are the ramifications if they find the perpetrator for intentionally harming a manatee like that?
I don't know exactly the extent, but manatees are protected under state and federal law. So there could be a significant fine, or I guess possibly even a prison term for somebody that's caught doing that, intentionally hurting a manatee. There was a boater that was, he was a fisherman in northern Florida. And after so many instances of being caught blowing through manatee zones, the judge issued him a fine. I think he had to do community service, like a $10,000 fine, and they took his boat away. So basically, they took his livelihood away. They said, "You've had enough." So
Yeah,
big
absolutely.
for all that matter. Yes,
Well,
it can be pretty significant for somebody caught doing that.
thank you. Yeah, hopefully they'll catch this person. Derek, I know that the numbers that you mentioned in your presentation, the reduction of population up to 98% in some species of sharks, it's really hard to wrap your head around that. And I know you mentioned, many of the reasons, and we hear a lot as municipal officials about finning operations and things like that. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about noise pollution, underwater noise pollution, and what maybe municipal officials could do to assist if that's a big issue.
I would almost turn that one over to Laura, because the sound is going to have a larger impact likely on the marine mammals than the sharks so much. I mean, it would still have an impact, but I believe they're much more sensitive than the sharks would be to, that noise issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some species, like I mentioned, our beaked whales that are a little bit more sensitive to barotrauma, so meaning trauma within the ear canal. So when we're conducting these necropsies, especially on those, we want to make sure that we're surveying that ear canal properly, and we're taking samples from that area. We have the capability, of course, to call up the Navy, and we've had to do that before, where we've had mass strainings. We can call up the Navy and ask them if they've been conducting any sonar within the area. And so there is that capability to kind of back check and work with our federal administration to try to see what's been going on within the area and get a little bit more information about what was going on within the life of that animal.
Is there any talk of regulating noise coming from regular, boats that we see out there? I mean, it's so loud, even from the shoreline, when you hear some of these jet skis or boats going by. Is there any movement to regulate that in an effort to protect wildlife?
Within small localized areas, I'm unaware of that, but that does feed in also to the speed zones. So of course, when you're going at various speeds, you're conducting various amounts of, you're working on different frequencies of the production of the sound itself. If you're boating a little bit slower, you're actually producing at a different frequency, and it may be less harmful to some of these.
Well, that's a great point. So it's not just about giving the animals a chance to get out of the way, it's also the noise levels. So that's great. Derek, we hear so much about protecting the sea turtles during nesting season through outdoor lighting restrictions, and we have a lot of code enforcement, and I'm sure other coastal cities do too out there. What about interior lights? You hear more and more about the interior lighting issue. What can businesses do, or what should we as city officials do, or residents do, to protect the turtles from intense indoor lighting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is one, we do lighting surveys throughout the season to kind of monitor what's going on with lighting, to see where their potential downfalls are and things like that for that sea turtle friendly lighting. And interior lighting is almost always one of our highest infractions. And that's private homes, that's condos, that's businesses, that's all these things. So, one of the biggest is, turning off lights that you don't need on to begin with, but shades. There are tint options for homes and businesses that have huge impacts, huge positive impacts, both for the animals, but also for the homeowner, with lower cooling costs and things like that, because it keeps a lot of that solar heat out of the house to begin with. But that's the biggest one, is just closing drapes, turning off, especially any any lights that would be directed towards the beach have those either not directly pointed at windows or using, lower amounts of, lower wattage bulbs, things like that. But really the biggest is closing those drapes or tinting windows is a huge, huge benefit.
Thank you. And Pat, a question from Penny Cutt. As the South Waterway Zone is out of slips pursuant to the boat facility siting plan, is the county considering potential release of additional slips?
Hey, Penny. Yeah, we're discussing that with FWC right now, and I think they're going to take a preliminary look at our Manatee Protection Plan and look at what the issues may be, whether there may be room for modifying our slip counts at this point, but there's really nothing set in stone that I could specifically say right now.
Okay.
We're looking at it.
Thank you. And Laura, this is from Brady Morgan. In addition to rescuing marine mammals during strandings, does Mars rehabilitate how do you pronounce it? Cetaceans off the beach at a long-term facility, or does most of the rehabilitation and rescue occur on site?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Brady. So we actually have had facilities in the past. So we have what we call a pop-up facility. It's a space that's on Virginia Key at University of Miami's Rasmus campus, and but we only pop it up when needed. So the last time we've had to use it was in 2005 to a stranding of rough-toothed dolphins, and Mars took in 2 of those animals and did long-term care for them for several months, and then successfully was able to re-release them. So typically in the past, we've had to work with FWC on the capability of having that pop-up system again for manatees. So there, as Pat mentioned, like 2009, 2010, really bad cold stress year for the animals. And there was the potential that the long-term rehabilitation facilities for manatees within the state would actually reach capacity. And so they started to talk to us about, and other organizations around the state, training organizations that could use these pop-up facilities if there was any need for extra cases of animals for rehabilitation. So we do have the capability, but we don't have an office. We're, like I said, 100% volunteer run. We're kind of a low-scale outfit. We respond when needed. So not currently, we don't have one. We don't have an animal care.
Okay, and we're a little past our time. I'm going to ask one more question from me, and anybody and everybody can jump in. But as we all know, Broward has passed a seawall mandate for municipal governments and residents to help with sea level rise issues. But I'm curious if anybody is looking at the impact of these sea level walls on future generations of sea life, sea mammals, and things like that. I don't know, Pat, have you looked at that at all?
No, I haven't. Broward is so heavily armored, it's probably not going to have much of an effect on the animals in our county. So
Okay.
we don't have a whole lot of living shoreline for that would be replaced with seawalls. So I don't think it would have too much of an immediate effect on the animals here.
Well, we're hoping we can put in some more living shorelines, so maybe it'll end up being a real positive. So with that, I personally just want to thank Alyssa so much for putting this together, and her staff over in the city of Hallandale Beach. Technologically, it was great and so informative. Thank you, Pat and Derek and Laura, so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Alyssa. Thanks so much, Alyssa. Thanks for having me.
Oh, and thank you for moderating, Commissioner Shuham, and thank you all for your wonderful presentations. We have a lot of people in the chat box actually wondering if you all can present to their students. So I'm sure you'll be getting some requests coming here soon. So just to close out, I wanted to thank our sponsors for Ocean Day, for these webinars, for the in-person event that didn't happen but will as soon as we can safely again. So that's Hazen, Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, Pinnacle Ecological, and SU. Your department, Dr. Burkholder, and the National Parks Conservation Association. Also that we're having some upcoming webinars and events. So next month on the 1st of February at this time, we'll be having a low nutrient landscaping and gardening webinar. Nutrient runoff can have a not great impact on waterways, so we want to cover how you can take care of a beautiful landscape but have minimal impacts. And also the city of Hollywood and Hollandale Beach will be having native plant and tree distribution on March 6th. We're just putting the details together for that, so stay tuned. But you can get the information for the next webinar at floridareefs.org/oceanday.html. And thank you for being here. We'll be sending a follow-up link with the recording for this so you can share it. And I'm grateful that 73 people at the peak of this wanted to learn about marine animals today. So thank you for being here, and enjoy the knowledge, move forward, do what you can. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks for
everyone.
having us.
Bye.
Thank you.